safe. In Rhode Island, we're working on issues that have to do raising education levels for all our students in our state. That's going to be impacted. And tell me, how does that help a state like Rhode Island reach its goals when you're taking away education aid? We're looking at raising incomes. So how does it help raising incomes in our state when people are losing their jobs, and that impacting in ways the budget impacts the way that we can actually deliver the services that we need to provide, and then certainly the medical benefits. 144,000 Rhode Islanders have SNAP, and they rely on that. And yet, what's going to happen when what hits the fan? And the fact of the matter is that the federal government, through the Trump administration, the Trump's budget, and the budget that was passed by the Republicans in Washington, is no more than a bait and switch. It is basically taking the responsibility, using our money, because we send our money to Washington, and then we expect that it's returned to us in ways to help our states. And yet all it's done is move responsibility from the federal government onto the states. And as mentioned, we're not going to be able to absorb the significant reduction in funding that's coming our way. And who's going to either pay for that? The taxpayers are going to pay for it in our states, or the benefits are going to get reduced. So I'm happy to be here again. Thank the DGA, the opportunity, thank for the media that here is listening to the real story that's happening in this country, and the reason why Democratic governors are stepping up to make sure that we protect not only our state, but we partner together to protect our residents that live in our states. And in a crazy way, we're protecting people around the entire country by the work that we're doing. And I really am proud to be here with Governor Walz, and certainly he had a journey last year that we are very proud of you taking, and we are really honored, again, to have you here today to speak on behalf of the people in Minnesota.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks to my friend and neighbor, Governor Evers, putting on a great show here, and to all of DGA, to Chair Kelly and Vice Chair Beshear. They're working hard, but the American people are reflecting in the hard work they're doing with historic fundraising numbers and engagement with Democratic governors, who, I remind folks, represent the majority of the American public and a vast majority of the American economy. Many of our states are payer states. We put more into the federal government than we get back. On Wednesday, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of Medicaid, an incredible program to lift people up. You've heard it from our states. 70% of our children are on that, the vast majority of our rural nursing homes. In Minnesota, this piece of legislation will kick 140,000 people off, costing about $1.2 billion. But it's not about the dollars, and it's not just saying 140,000 people. These are families that have access to health care. It means that they stay healthy and they go to work. I was with the CEO of Fairview Hospitals the other day, and he described our healthcare system as a Jenga tower, and he said this is one that you can't pull out. And he says that because, be very clear about this, the reimbursement rates are already very thin around Medicaid, but if that comes out and people drop off, and then the subsidies go off the ACA on the exchanges, people will drop off. The healthiest ones, our risk pools will include. And he said, you know what this really is? This is a hidden tax on business, and the business community needs to stand up because they have no choice except to pass on this cost to the employers. And this whole argument was what? Was this about reducing the national debt? Is that what this was about? Because it adds $3.4 trillion to the debt. Was it about improving people's lives? There's not a single person that's improved by this move that they put in, other than the minority of people. And I keep hearing them tell about this. They often talk about minorities are hurting this country. That minority of billionaires is hurting this country, and their incessant need to see tax breaks on the back of working Minnesotans, working Kentuckians, folks across this country. So I'm proud to be with Democratic governors. We have to work together. We have to make the trains run on time and get our children in school and get folks fed. We have to make sure we have clean drinking water. This piece of legislation alone, because of hell-bent on deciding to reject the science around climate, but it's even more than that. By rejecting what they're doing and forcing us to buy and unshutter dirty coal plants, it's estimated that Minnesota's utility bills will go up 28% over the next 2 biennium. That's the type of thing that this piece of legislation did. So while we celebrated 60 years of a visionary program that was celebrated by Democrats and Republicans bipartisanly, this president's incessant desire to tear everything down that was done before him at the expense of the American people is causing incredible damage. That's why I'm proud to stand with the folks who are here, proud to stand with a group of people who are fighting to make sure they get things done. And listening to these folks, you hear it. We just passed an incredibly good bipartisan piece of legislation in Minnesota, and we had the closest divided legislature in the country. Smart investments, tax cuts for the middle class, things that make a difference on innovation and growth. So glad to be here today, glad to be sharing ideas with the folks that are here, glad to be standing up, and I think Governor McKee is right about this, that it's, and each one of them said it, it's Democratic governors and our attorney generals who are challenging these reckless and in many cases unconstitutional and unlawful moves, and it just keeps piling on. But the one thing is, we will not get tired, we will not back down, we will continue to stand with the people of our states to improve their lives. With that, I'll turn it back to our chair, Governor Kelly. Thank you.
All right, I think we'll take questions if you've got any. If you want to direct them to a particular governor, feel free.
Governor, thank you for having this press conference. A couple questions, and hoping that perhaps you and Governor Beshear can respond at least. One is your response to the Texas Republican redraw. And if other Democratic governors, some have said that there should, in Democratic-held states, a redraw to align to counter what's happening in Texas. What is your response? And two, you mentioned the president's one big beautiful bill. Legislation. What is your response? There's a lot of news over the last 24 hours over his tariffs and his announcements. Is there, anyone wants to respond, but those two questions.
Okay. On the first question on the Texas redistricting, first of all, I think it's going to be ruled unconstitutional. You know, it clearly will go to court. So we'll see. But in the meantime, I think it's incumbent upon Democrat governors, if they have the opportunity to respond in kind. I'm not a big believer in unilateral disarmament. I love bipartisanship. That's how my entire career in the state Senate and now as governor has operated. And I do everything I possibly can to bring the parties together to come to consensus. This is clearly a situation where they're not asking for input. And so I think we need to respond in kind, which I think we do to protect the American people. If they are allowed to succeed, we know what will happen. Things are bad enough in Washington right now. What it would look like if there's even a greater majority that this president controls, God help the United States of America. So I think it's incumbent upon us to respond.
I'll answer tariffs.
You got tariffs.
Sure.
They're bad, Andy.
Yeah, they are.
In most cases.
Tariffs are a tax on the American people, and it's going to make it harder for that American family that is already struggling to pay the bills, that may have voted for Donald Trump because he said he'd make it easier to pay those bills. Most won't be able to get by. My state is projected to get hit by tariffs harder than anywhere. And we have more people that are living right on those margins, and we have more small businesses that aren't going to be able to absorb these costs and are already starting to lay people off. I look at the fact that most people in my state might get a couple $100 out of this continued tax break. Yet the Yale study says it's about $2,700 in extra costs on every American family. So think about how bad that deal is for Americans, certainly for Kentuckians. At the end of the day, this is hurting our people and it's hurting our national reputation. The idea that we would push Japan and South Korea towards China is bad for our national security, and long term it's going to be bad for our economy. The idea that we would take the EU, which its countries are important allies to the United States, and create the type of hostility we're seeing, or that one of our most important allies and friends, Canada, would be attacked repeatedly by a president of the United States was unthinkable before this current administration. So this tariff policy hurts our families, hurts our standing in the world, makes us less secure, and again, it's going to be a betrayal of those families that were already struggling to pay the bills, and they thought that he was the candidate that would help.
Could you and Governor Walz respond to the redistricting question, and also Governor
Well, I think you know that there are some governors who are considering looking at their or maps in their particular states, and so that's what I mean. Is I hate the fact that we're here, that we even have to consider something this drastic, and I do think ultimately, both will be found unconstitutional, whether it's coming from a red state or a blue state. But in the meantime, just in case, I think it's incumbent upon them to do what needs to be done to protect the United States.
Sure. Yeah, having served in Congress, I first got asked after my first term there, well, how would you fix Congress? And my response was, yeah, it was a small one. I said, campaign finance reform and nonpartisan judicial redistricting, and I believe very strongly in that. But I also agree with Governor Kelly very strongly that this move is unconstitutional. It's again breaking the system. It's again meant to game the system. I want to stress again, Democratic governors, whether it's 23 of us, represent the majority of the public and a large majority of the economy. And in many cases, by gerrymandering and moving things around, it's an unfair representation. Now, that being said, we go back to the unilateral disarmament, that Democrats are expected to have the decorum, we're expected to protect the institutions, we're expected to follow the rules on this. We're not playing with a normal administration. We're playing one that is throwing all the rules out of there. And if the courts that he has packed aren't going to do that, then I think it is incumbent upon states that have the capacity or the ability to make sure that we are responding in kind. It is a terrible spot we're in as a country, but not responding is going to make it even worse. So I agree with Governor Kelly.
Governor, could you talk a little bit more about the hidden cost of business of the Trump budget bill and also the tariffs, and if the others would like to?
Yeah, I would start with energy. Just so we're Midwestern folks, we're part of MISO, the grid and how we exchange energy. Much better situation, I might add, than Texas. It's on their own, and you have the blackouts and all of that. But the point is this is going to force all of our ratepayers in all of our states in the Midwest to pay for bringing back and updating a coal-fired power plant in Michigan to try and make up for the difference from the clean energy that's already reached parity price. That is going to raise utility rates 28%. For individual families, that'll be higher bills. For businesses, that will be passing on the cost to consumers. And the issue around health care is the CEO made it very clear, and before he spoke, he said, I'm sure my team's going to be not happy about this, but I'm just going to speak about this. And he just simply said, you know how this works, that they make up with the private plans and the business plans for people in healthcare to make up for the Medicaid piece that's already very marginal on reimbursement rates. When those are gone, when the healthy people drop off the system, when we have a smaller pool, insurance costs for businesses are going to go up, and they're going to be passed on to them by the hospitals. And as Andy said, those are big systems. Small rural hospitals don't have that capacity, and they will close. We're already seeing emergency rooms shutter. We're seeing birthing centers close and consolidate, and that is going to, again, I think each of these said it, and those of us all represent some rural areas, they're going to get hurt the worst.
Governor, sorry. I was hoping Governor Beshear could also address
Sure.
that one because
I can give you a very specific example. This was shepherded through the House by Brett Guthrie. Brett Guthrie's district not only has numerous rural hospitals, but we announced 3 of the 5 biggest battery plants on planet Earth in his district. That is 7,000 potential Kentucky jobs that at least it may take us longer to bring into effect. I mean, when you undermine what had been passed into law, what businesses had relied upon to make major decisions on investment, and you're going to ultimately hit employment. And the idea that we had so many congressmen or women and senators vote for something that every single projection showed would cost jobs in their district, would slow down the economy, and ultimately would have people lose health care is just unconscionable. I mean, we are supposed to be Americans first, and Democrats and Republicans second and third. They swear an oath, oftentimes with their hand on a Bible I try to follow, that says that they will support and uphold the Constitution and ultimately do their best for their people. Well, putting your party or your president before what's best for your people is just not doing your job.
Governor Walz and Governor Kelly, on redistricting, just to follow quickly on that, when you said we need to respond in kind, Governor Newsom of California has obviously indicated some interest in looking at California this does continue to escalate, Republicans have more opportunities to gerrymander their maps than Democrats do. I mean, Missouri, Florida, New Hampshire, Indiana, those are all states that could do it quickly and have the power to change it quickly, whereas, blue states, New York couldn't do it without changing its state constitution. That would take several years. There are more redistricting commissions in blue states. Is there a risk here that if this continues to escalate, that ultimately you guys may still come out losers because there's just not as many opportunities to do that kind of work?
Well, I would say on this, look, we're all going to come out losers because Donald Trump started this to break the system, to try and make sure, because he's unpopular, they are going to lose the midterm election. So he's doing everything he can. So yes, I think there's validity in what you're saying. There's also states that they can't gerrymander, like South Dakota, like North Dakota, and some of those states. This is not a good way to move this. And I hope, as Governor Kelly said, is the American people start to hear this. But yes, I worry about that. That's why I don't think it's a good idea. That's why I think it needs to be struck down as unconstitutional. And to be quite candid, that's why we try not to do it in our history as a country, and we try to have fair districts. And we know that people have tried this forever. We've seen the snake districts as they've been put together. This is just a more blatant saying the quiet part out loud. But yeah, your question's valid, and I do worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, is there a risk, Governor Kelly, that this sort of spirals?
There's a risk to doing nothing, too.
Yeah, Governor Walz just said what I was going to say, that there's a bigger risk in doing nothing. We can't just let this happen and act like it's fine and hope that the courts fix it. We have no idea, quite honestly, at this point, what the courts might do. But by virtue of us responding in kind, we do send a message. We're not going to take this lying down. We will put up a fight. And when we put up that fight, who's going to be paying attention? The American people are going to be paying attention, and then they're going to recognize who's really on their side, because they'll understand what this gerrymandering is all about. So I don't think it's a conversation that the Republicans really want to have. I think they like to just slip it under the rug, but that won't happen if they continue along this vein. And I think they're less likely to continue if we respond.
Can you realistically change the maps in any of your 5 states? I don't see it.
Well, not enough.
I could, but what would I do? I'd just give them another Republican. Don't worry, I'm not going that way.
That's a good answer. No, ours is dictated. And look, I said this, and Iowa does this very, very fairly. They do nonpartisan judicial redistricting that are agreed to be fair. We write our partisan maps, and they're always thrown out in court by Republican and Democratic judges. Then they write them, and I think it's agreed in Minnesota they're fair.
And I'm not being asked, but I'm from Rhode Island, and I'll kind of weigh in here a little bit. Look, this is part of the chaos that is coming from Washington. I talk to people every day in my state. They're very unsettled. They don't have a lot of confidence on what's coming out of Washington right now. And this is just more of the chaos with this redistricting strategy. So they're just going to keep on piling on and piling on. And what happens, you ask them, well, how this is going to impact health, education, or economy. When you undermine the confidence of the people who live in our states, collectively in the country, and this, by the way, this is not just blue states and red states. This chaos is causing a great deal of unsettling in the minds of the people who live in the state, in the country, and clearly in the state of Rhode Island.